Okay, so I fully understand that at this point it's quite a stretch to call these mainline Sonic games, and honestly, I don't really consider them mainline Sonic games. These are more of spin-offs, but I think that they're interesting enough that they warrant talking about, because they're kind of cool in their own way, and they kind of are relevant to things that will come in the future. So let's talk a little bit about Sonic 3D Blast. And of course, for Sonic 3D Blast, you want to go with the Director's Cut on Genesis, the ROM hack made by John Burton. That is technically unofficial, but he was the lead on the original game, so it's kind of like the official version, or whatever. I don't really care if it's official or not. This is definitely the best way to play Sonic 3D Blast. It comes with a level select, better controls, better ways to find where your lost Flickies are, just, in general, way better than any other version of the game. So now the game itself, Sonic 3D Blast, how is it? Well, a lot of people are not the biggest fans of this game, and I totally understand that. But personally, I actually kind of like it. I think it's pretty fun. It's not like the greatest thing in the world, and it definitely doesn't hold up to, you know, the actual mainline Sonic games, but as its own little thing, I think it's pretty okay. I enjoy Sonic 3D Blast. So what you got here is a quote-unquote 3D platformer. I mean, it technically is 3D, but it's not actually rendering anything in 3D with polygons. It's all done with sprite art in an isometric view. And that kinda does come with some problems, because isometry is not really, like, perspective correct in how things look in 3D space, so it can kind of be hard to tell where you're standing. But shadows kind of help along with that. It actually kind of, I feel it works better to think of this game more as just a top-down game looked at from an angle, because that's kind of what it ends up feeling like. Anyway, core gameplay. So Sonic 3D Blast is a platformer, of course, but it's not like a straightforward get to the end of the level kind of thing like the mainline Sonic games is. Your goal is to get to the end of the level, but you can't just go there. Your objective is to find the 5 Flickies hidden around the level, and then destroy the robots therein, free them, and then take them to some big ring that you can deposit them into. And then once you've done that 2 or 3 or maybe 4 times, then you'll clear the level. Each set of 5 Flickies are grouped up into different areas of the level, so clearing the first set of 5 will unlock the next section of the level where you'll find the next 5 Flickies, and so on and so forth. And I don't know, I haven't really paid that much attention to like what other people have to say about this game, but I have no issues with this kind of structure. I think it works well enough, because with an isometric game, it's really hard to do like traditional platforming challenges the way that you can in 2D, because you just don't have as strong of a grasp of where you are in 3D space and where platforms are and where enemies are. It's just a lot harder to have a proper understanding of what's going on. And that's a complaint that I hear sometimes people have with 3D platformers in general, and in real 3D platformers, I don't really ever have that problem. But certainly here, with an isometric view, it definitely can become a little bit difficult to tell where you actually are. Again, as I said, the shadows help, but you still run into trouble here and there a little bit. And so trying to make a traditional Sonic game in this kind of structure probably would not have worked out very well, so this different type of game design where it's now almost like a series of micro collectathons that you have to do to get to the next area, I think it works pretty well for how this game had to be done. Since this was a Genesis game, real 3D was totally impossible, so I think this is a fairly good compromise, and I think it works well enough. For controls, Sonic kind of moves how you would expect him to in quote-unquote 3D. You still build up speed from a walk, and there's a little bit of momentum in your turning, like you can't just turn on a dime. You do kind of slip and slide around a little bit, because if you have a bunch of speed going in one direction, you can't just get rid of that, just like in the 2D games. So you end up kind of sliding around a little bit if you're trying to make sharp turns and stuff like that. And I think that works fairly well. That feels like kind of how Sonic should move in 3D based on, you know, the laws of momentum. So it can get a little bit difficult maybe to precisely move Sonic at high speed, but if you just be careful enough, then I don't really find it that much of a problem. It also helps that in the director's cut version of this game, the camera moves around a little bit more to give you a better view of where you're looking and where you're going, so that kind of helps, make sure that you are prepped for what's coming. And that's certainly nice, because speed in general in an isometric view is pretty hard to do, because when you're moving really fast, you don't have a lot of screen real estate to tell what the hell is coming on screen so you can do something about it. But, I mean, that's not too different from the 2D games. When you were going super duper fast in those, you couldn't really see what was going on. It's just that by the nature of the isometry, it's even slower you start to run into that problem, which is why, as I said, if you just be careful, it's relatively okay. But another thing they added in the director's cut is that if you move really, really fast, Sonic, if he runs into something that would normally hurt him, he won't take damage. He'll still bounce off of it as if he had gotten hit, but you won't actually lose any coins. So that's pretty nice. A good little improvement there to compensate for the issues of just being able to see what's going on. That's definitely an appreciated addition to this game. I think it helps. Jumping is pretty standard fare, about what you would expect in this game. Sonic has no air action, so you got no insta-shield or anything, which is fine. I would have preferred it. Definitely would have been helpful in an isometric game like this, but we don't got one. You can make do without it. It's fine. But one big thing that this game does is, just by the nature of it, it is a 2-button game, as opposed to what Sonic has been up to this point historically, just a 1-button game, because in 3D space, you can no longer just press down to get Sonic to crouch or roll, since down now moves you down. So we now have to have a button devoted to rolling and spin dashing, and so that's what we have in this game. If you're standing in place, you can hold a button, and Sonic will charge a spin dash. You don't rev it in this system, you just hold it and it charges automatically over time. It works relatively well, and if you're running along, then you can hit the button to roll into a ball. And different from the 2D games is that you can actually uncurl out of a ball while on the ground. If you just turn sharply enough, Sonic will exit the ball form on his own. Another fun property that rolling has in this game is that it interacts with walls differently than just running around does. If you run diagonally into a wall, then Sonic will slide up along the wall, but if you roll into a wall, then Sonic kinda like pinball ricochets off of it, and you can use this to get through areas relatively quickly without needing very precise movement, weaving in and out through all these tight turns. You can just bounce your way to victory as long as you can get the angles right. And again, I think this is pretty fun, and it works pretty well. So in terms of controls, you got the issues of the isometric view inherently, but within that, problem, I think Sonic controls pretty well, especially in this director's cut version, and it works well enough. And honestly, that is pretty much the whole game. Like, structure-wise, it does the typical Sonic thing. You got zones, and each zone has its own level gimmicks and hazards and stuff. At the end of the zone, you fight a boss, and they're okay-ish. Nothing too amazing, but they're fine. You collect Flickies, complete levels, and you keep doing that until you finish the game. And I think it's a relatively good time. It doesn't go on for too long. It's about like an hour-long game or something like that. And I think it works well enough. It's fun. It's not amazing, it's not stupendous, it's not incredible, but it's fun. One extra note I want to add to this game is that it does have shields, like previous Sonic games has had, but it does them kinda similarly to how it's been done in the past, but it does a little bit of various different things all over the place, kind of in a weird way, because, in Sonic 1 and 2, you had the shields that just protected you from a hit. But then in Sonic 3, they added the elemental shields, which will protect you entirely from some attack types, and you get a special air action. And they kinda did all of those things, but separately. So you got the blue shield, and that'll just protect you from one hit. But then you got the red shield, the fire shield, I guess, but you don't get the air dash property of it like you do in Sonic 3. You just get the immunity to fire. And then you have the yellow shield, which doesn't give you any elemental strength, but it does give Sonic a unique air action. He can do this homing attack, where if you jump into the air, and then you hit jump again, if there's an enemy close enough, then Sonic will just automatically fly to that enemy, which is definitely very helpful for lining up your jumps on enemies, because again, isometric view, kinda hard to precisely land where you want sometimes, so that's definitely a nice little help. The only other thing to talk about is special stages, because yep, this game has those too, and entering the special stages is relatively typical fare for what we've seen up to this point, so you get 50 coins, and somewhere hidden in every single level is Tails and Knuckles, and you just gotta go up to them with 50 coins, and then you get transported into a special stage. They're not very good. I mean, they're not, like, frustrating or annoying or super difficult like a lot of the past games have been, but they're just really, really easy. I mean, you just run forward on these bridges, and you just have to get enough coins to hit the count and avoid the spikes, and that's it. And there's just such an overwhelming abundance of coins that you can make tons of mistakes, and you'll still get it pretty much every single time. I don't think I ever failed one of these special stages in my recent playthrough, because they're just so freaking easy. So, I mean, they're slight, but they're not offensive. I guess they're fine. I mean, they definitely flow better with this game than they do with the other games, because this is not a game where you're going to be trying to rush through it as quickly as possible like the main Sonic games are. So being a bit more careful and taking it a bit slower is what I end up doing anyway. And so going for the Chaos Emeralds doesn't really feel like as much of a dedication in this game. It's just kind of something you do along the way, and it's not very intrusive or annoying, so it's fine. I would argue I actually prefer these special stages in Chaos Emerald Quest to the ones in the main games. So there. And similar to Sonic 3, once you get all the Chaos Emeralds, you get access to the final boss fight, though you don't get to be Super Sonic in the final boss. It's just a normal final boss, because in the original version of Sonic 3D Blast, there was no Super Sonic for getting all the Chaos Emeralds. But thankfully, in Director's Cut, John Burton went and added that into this version of the game, so once you get all the Chaos Emeralds, you can turn into Super Sonic. And I actually want to take this time to give a bit of an apology to Super Sonic as a mechanic, because in my previous videos, I was pretty dismissive of Super Sonic, saying that I don't like it and all that. And the reason that I said that was because, you know, as I have stated up to this point, my main interest with the Sonic games is the time attack, and I feel that the way that Super Sonic is implemented is just very inelegant for time attack. It just doesn't work very well for trying to do that kind of thing, because it kind of just gets in the way of Sonic's moveset. Like, if you're trying to do a Sonic run, then going for Super Sonic slows the game down, but then once you have Super Sonic, you kind of now break his levels, where speeding through them just doesn't really have the same feel to it. That's why I mentioned in the Sonic 3 video, I would prefer if Super Sonic or Hypersonic, whichever, was their own devoted separate character that you could time attack separately. But actually, since making those videos, I went back and I decided, let me actually give Super Sonic a fair shot, because I kinda unlocked Super Sonic and Hypersonic in those games and then just never really used it. And I decided, you know what, I'm not really happy with that, because I didn't do my due diligence and actually give that playthrough type a shot. So I went back to Sonic 1, 2, and 3 and Knuckles and did a Super/Hypersonic run through a game, where I just loaded up my completed save file. I didn't record any of this, so I don't have footage of it, but I ran through my completed save files using Supersonic or Hypersonic whenever I got the opportunity, not trying to time attack, just doing a basically vanilla run. And it's actually pretty fun to just blast through the game with a crazy overpowered character. I would not say that I prefer it to just doing a vanilla normal standard playthrough with Sonic, but it works as a good alternative optional playthrough. And I would actually even say that in that context, I kind of like the 50 coin requirement to trigger Super and Hypersonic, because it means you gotta be very careful, and, you know, me being me, sure, I can try to be careful, but I'm still gonna try to go fast, and so trying to balance speed and precision to avoid getting hits, it actually works out being pretty fun. I kinda like, you know, having to perform well enough in order to earn that payoff of getting now a super-powered character where you can just sloppily plow through the entire game, ignoring most of the stuff. And with the high jump and especially the hyper flash and increased speed that these characters have, they give you new opportunities for different routes that you can take that other characters can't take as well or as quickly as Super and Hypersonic can. So actually, they are totally valid and cool as their own playthroughs. So you know what? I completely take back what I said before about not liking Super and Hypersonic. I actually think it's pretty cool. And in the case of Sonic 3D Blast, I definitely appreciate John Burton adding it into this game, though it's a bit unfortunate that the way that he altered Director's Cut for this game is that now you can only get one Chaos Emerald per zone, meaning you don't even unlock Supersonic until you're done with the game, essentially. But that's fine, because I would recommend doing a Supersonic playthrough anyway, going back through the game and playing it all over again, now with the ability to get Supersonic. So Sonic 3D Blast! Is it as good as a real Sonic game? No, but it also really isn't anything like the real Sonic games. It has certain similarities in the momentum concepts and stuff, but the design is so different. The isometric 3D nature of the level design makes it feel very different. In so many ways, this game is just doing its own thing, that I don't really feel it's fair to compare it to the real mainline Sonic games, because it's not really a mainline Sonic game. It is its own game, and when you get over the fact that it's not like the other games, it's not bad! The next game I want to talk about is actually Sonic Jam. I'm not really too interested in talking about the compilation of 1, 2, and 3 and Knuckles on here. I've already covered those games and what I would call superior versions, but this game does have unique difficulty modes with modified level design, and that's only available in Sonic Jam, so that's kind of cool. But the main thing I want to talk about with this game is the Sonic World feature in it, because it is very, very neat, very interesting. So what Sonic World is it's basically a glorified menu. It's a little 3D hub world that you can run around with Sonic in, basically just to go to different little extra menu options, like watching special cutscenes or listening to the music and shit like that. But alongside just being a little hub area to get to different options within Sonic Jam, it actually kind of works as its own little, 3D Sonic playground. Because fun fact, this little Sonic world here is actually built off of the scrapped Saturn prototype of what would eventually become Sonic Adventure. They started development on that game for Saturn, but the Dreamcast was coming out around the time they were working on the game, so they were like, should we even bother continuing the Saturn version, or should we just start over on Dreamcast? And they decided to do that, and they took what they had and they reworked it into this little thing here. So in a way, this is kind of like getting a glimpse at the Sonic adventure that could have been, and I think that's cool and worth checking out just on its own for that reason. And I think it's pretty cool. I mean, there's not a whole lot here in terms of gameplay, because as I said, it's just a tiny little hub world, kind of a little playground. There's nothing to really do here. The only objectives to do in the Sonic world is this little, mint-looking platform thing. You can step on that, and then it'll give you a menu with some kind of objective and a time limit to do, and then you can run around and try to do one of those objectives and then land back on the thing, and if you do it in time, then you unlock the next objective to aim for, and that's pretty much the only thing there is to do here, and it's fun enough, kind of. It's amusing. It's, nothing amazing. I wouldn't say you have to do these challenges or anything, but it gives you some incentive to actually run around here to aim for, rather than just wandering and looking around at the Saturn graphics. Though I gotta say, I really like the look of this game. I'm a big fan of, the super-duper Saturn low-poly Sonic look. I really, really like it. Anyway, the challenge objectives are mainly just, collect a certain number of coins, hit all the checkpoints, find all the hidden things, grab onto tails, stuff like that. It's nothing too amazing, but it gives you a little bit of reason to run around here, and it's fun. I also do like how Sonic does kind of control how he should a little bit in this game. He still does build up to speed, though this doesn't really have the proper momentum turning like 3D Blast does. You can just spin around on a circle and a dime, but whatever, it's not a real game, so I'm not too caught up on that kind of thing. But when it comes to jumping and moving forward, you do continue the momentum that you have in that direction, and so if you want to precisely land on platforms, you do kind of have to pull back, just like you do in the 2D games, in order to land precisely, because you can't just stop in the air. Your momentum will carry through, and so you have to kind of reverse it if you want to stop. So it's kind of cool to see them trying to simulate Sonic controls a little bit in 3D in this little prototype. You can see the remnants of actual platforming still baked in here. So yeah, the Sonic world, nothing too spectacular or amazing, but a fun little curio, especially if you really like the early 3D Saturn look of Sonic like I do. And once you complete all the challenges, a big ring spawns in the level, and then you can head over to it, and then you jump in, and what's this? 3D special stages? No, not really. All you get is the credits of Sonic Jam. What this is the special stages of Sonic 3D Blast on the Saturn, because they actually made different special stages for the Saturn version of that game. Which, by the way, even though the Saturn is a more powerful machine than the Genesis, I still wouldn't recommend that version just generally for playing Sonic 3D Blast, because while it does have nicer visuals and different music, the director's cut of 3D Blast on Genesis just has so many nice improvements that that's still my recommended version. But I do find these Saturn special stages to be very cool. What you got here is basically just the half-pipe special stages of Sonic 2, but now they're actually rendered in 3D, and holy shit, does that make a difference. Like, the mobile remake of Sonic 2 already improved on the special stages, but it still kind of tried to emulate how those worked to a degree, so it still had visibility issues. But here, they did not try to go for that kind of thing at all. They just went for half-pipe, new version, now fully in 3D. And because of that, they are way, way better. Visibility is basically never a problem in these special stages. I have always had enough time to react to anything that comes up in these special stages, no issue. Memorization is gone. You can now actually play these. And then on top of that, them being 3D, they can add in extra cool little things, like you got springs to get to higher platforms, you got these corkscrews that you go through and stuff. It's just a very cool and very fun way to do this type of special stage. And another thing that they do that is very Sonic-y and simulating Sonic physics that's very cool in 3D is that when you're going along these half-pipes, it's not like Sonic 2 where you're just moving at a set speed. Sonic actually does react to slopes appropriately in this game. If the tube starts going up, Sonic will run a little bit slower, and if it starts going downhill, you'll run faster, and in fact you can even roll into a ball in these special stages, and if you roll downhill, you will pick up a ton of speed. And it's just really fun to get to do these normal Sonic physics things in 3D in these type of traditional special stages. It's just really cool. So if you're a freak like me and you absolutely need to see all of the early 3D Sonic stuff that they've done, I'd say that the Saturn version of Sonic 3D Blast is well worth checking out just to do these special stages. It's just unfortunate that these cool Saturn special stages don't really have a proper cool 3D Saturn Sonic game to go with. You know, if you take these two things, Sonic World from Jam and the special stages from Saturn 3D Blast, there's just an awesome 3D Sonic game here that could have been that we just never got. It's so unfortunate. But I mean, realistically, like, we're talking about the Saturn here, they probably couldn't actually make a real 3D Sonic game on that hardware, which is probably why they didn't. Oh well, I still think these things are pretty cool. I hope you did too. I'll see you next time.